name is Andrew Brooks. This is Non-Linear Existentialism, Emotions, Emotional States, and Their Possible Significance. Subtitled Experiencing Emotions and Being Emotional. I did a presentation just the other day on the exact same topic with most of the same slides. However, there were a couple of oversights on my part that I did not see during the presentation that I thought was important to actually redo the presentation, and also mention at the beginning that emotions are very important in the entire theory of nonlinear existentialism. However, they weren't included in the thesis, the treatment that brings everything together that I've entitled Separation and Integration. That oversight is on my part. When I put together that summary document, I kept on reminding myself to do it, but I never actually did. So that's why I want to actually bring to the fore on this one is that throughout separation and integration, it's in there, but it isn't explicitly mentioned. So the outline, as with the previous presentation that I've deleted and included this one, is divided in these sections. First, talk about what emotions and emotional states are, and this is going to be what they're usually termed or understood to be. Then I'm going to do the ad hoc non-linear existentialistic definition of emotions and emotional states, review non-linear existentialism, put it into context of the theory, then factors producing, controlling emotions and emotional states, and another section that's new here is emotions, emotional states, and philosophy. I think it's kind of interesting towards the end of this presentation just to kind of compare the three of them. So in standard form, what is emotions and emotional states? Emotions appear to be a person's unique response to a past, present, or future experiences. A person can have very strong emotions about what they've had in the past, what they perceive will happen in the future, or what presently will occur to them. And these emotions can vary greatly. They can be from sad, happy, perplexed, things like that. Everyone has an emotion, and I think they know what those are from experiential point of view. Then being emotional. Being emotional appears to affect a person's ability to effectively react, cope with the environment. I wanted to separate the two, and I don't think I did last time justice to the matter. A person can have emotions, but it doesn't mean they have to be emotional or about it, because when someone's saying someone's emotional, is that I think the outright implication is that they're overreacting, they're becoming loud, they're becoming boisterous, they're becoming less effective in what they are, they're becoming, and sometimes quite dangerous. And the last part that I wanted to bring up was what the components of the limbic system have often been linked to emotions. And I think a lot of research kind of expresses this opinion very strongly. So for the ad hoc nonlinear existentialist definition of emotions and emotional states, I offer the following. The level of cortical excitation and subsequent neuronal pattern instability experienced by a person when exposed to cortical stimulation. Such input may not only directly affect the neuronal areas specifically stimulated, but also other areas linked to them. So the idea is that in nonlinear existentialism, we have a baseline activity level, a certain amount of excitation, and that would be the background level upon which things are compared to. So you have that background level, and if you have a cortical pattern that's excited, it will have a reaction too. So you will get a subsequent outcome of the reaction between the steady state at that present time and then the excited sub-pattern that's being excited by the situation that's causing an emotional state to occur. And the outcome will depend on how those two interact with each other. And based on the previous definition, which was just offered, and what is commonly understood for these behaviors, which I mentioned in the first slide, the level of excitation associated with a stimulated neural pattern is the emotion, and the instability that may be produced by it is the emotional state. So not all emotions, when you have a certain level of excitation in the nervous system and central nervous system, that doesn't mean necessarily that an emotional state that we normally refer to will occur. If there's an instability that occurs because of the patterns that are stimulated or evoked by the initial emotion and how that reacts to the rest of the steady state neuronal patterns that are previously occurring within the nervous system, that it may lead to no emotional state, it might lead to an extraordinary emotional state. So review of non-linear existentialism. Basically, boil it down, is kind of an engineering system where the components of the feedback loop, positive negative feedback loop, try to obtain a previous amount of energy. That's why it's neuronal energetics, activated neural patterns, and the associated energy levels. So you might have a pattern within the system that is energized, and how it interplays with the rest of the system. It might increase the energy within the system, so bringing it back to its optimal level, which I've previously referred to as the PNBAL, which is the primary needs baseline activity level, or it may not. It may actually cause it to go down. So you might have a positive emotion, you might have a negative emotion. You might have a positive emotion that overall kind of decreases the levels, or vice versa. It depends on the a constellation of patterns that actually occur within the nervous system. It's very couched. It's very complex. You might have one part of the grouping that has one memory interact with another one and cause a whole fleet of memories from that one emotional memory or situation that comes up, and then it floods into emotional instability. So it's really hard to tell. And then review again, another central point of the nonlinear existentialism is frequency amplitude modulation, which is central to the entire theory of nonlinear existentialism, that basically in letter V1b of the cerebral cortex of telencephalon, basically it is believed that this layer first modulates frequencies, so binding of input and processing thereafter. And you have also amplitude modulation, which actually might cause instability to occur. Inherent instability, not much, but it can actually add up to, so you can actually have break in previous causation linkages. So whereas A, B, C, D, E would be considered linear, it might go A, B, F, G, and then that one, when it's considered by the system, might actually increase the overall energy. And finally, well, then the system shifts in order to establish that new pattern. And it was only with its variance that it allows for this to occur. So that's the next point. You have thought, which is a source of inherent electrical instability. And the kind of the steps towards that is that you have incongruence between patterns, which would be brought about by the modulation of the amplitude between patterns. That incongruence leads to interference, and the interference leads to instability, and the instability in little measures might actually cause the linear causations to temporarily no longer match perfectly, and then new pathways are considered. And then those new pathways, as mentioned before, may actually increase the overall energy of the system towards the optimal level of primary needs baseline activity level. And this entire thing is kind of brought together in what I've referred to as the self-line function, where you have negative and positive outcomes through the person's life. Overall, in the end, hopefully go towards residual incongruencies of zero. Again, this is just a very brief overview of this, just to put it in the context of what I previously talked about. This is an important slide, and kind of, I think it brings a few things together, and also, I hope, strengthens other arguments that I've made. So this is the factors controlling producing emotions and emotional states. So you have two large areas here. You have linear instability, so the actual patterns that there's no variance are laid down. They're laid down, causation is understood, and it doesn't change. They can lead to instability because perhaps a person has learned things that society does not deem correct, and they are in stable patterns, but they are there because they're laid down perhaps by the society they live in, perhaps in the home that they live in, or perhaps they have some form of neurotic behavior that's caused these patterns to form. So they can be linear, but they're also unstable. And then you've got the non-linear instability, which is kind of a cornerstone of the system, the FAM processing unit, frequency amplitude modulation, and this is considered inherent. And so we could see between the two. So for linear instability, the amount of instability that occurs, life experiences, and it's acquired. And so it could be varying congruency between past and present acquired neuronal patterns. It could be the intensity of the event that the person has come across. So the person has a emotion, it's a very, very strong emotion. That great one would be as they won lots of money. It's very intense, and it can lead to an emotional state. They could be momentarily hysteric. They lose their minds, as it were. Don't blame them. Or very sadly, as we've had in the news very recently, a very beloved basketball player was killed, and the intensity of that is going to bring a lot of emotions and emotional states because of that. And it isn't because of the non-linear instability from the inherent system. It's just that a pattern has degraded, a person who's very important within that pattern has gone. So the person they see something, they get emotion, and then how it interacts with the rest of the system causes the system to become extremely destabilized because certain components, extremely important components within those pathways are removed. Also, age is very important. The person can be quite young and not come up with coping strategies. So having this event, this emotion to emotional states that occur might overwhelm them. The duration of the event upon the person, people of course suffered in Auschwitz and places like that and other incarcerations. It can lead to all sorts of new pathways that are stable within that system, but then they get moved to other ones and it becomes extremely unstable, even though they're linearly discharged and put in within the system from acquiring life experiences in that context. And of course, there's also mental illnesses and medications and drugs that also can lead to linear instability. And is again juxtaposed with the inherent ones which are being offered by this theory. So you can see how those two kind of match, and also they vary. And I hope one kind of gives gives contrast to the other one. And then this one is another slide that I've added. This kind of like, I think it's kind of interesting to have this one. This just came up when I was reviewing what I've written before, that emotions and emotional states are going to be the cause. So you have the patterns that are laid down, and so you'll have them either being relatively stable, either high or low depression, or a little bit of not sadness, not depression, but you can have happiness, or you can have an emotional state which is considered normal, reasonable for what a person experiences, or you can have an emotional state where the person, because it is a strong, it strongly affects the system, it leads to elevated levels of instability the system cannot cause. So you have that cause. So the person has it upon themselves. And in philosophy, which we have to remember is the cornerstone of science, the cornerstone of thought, it was first asking itself, why is this occurring? And a philosopher, a great philosopher, can go, well, why am I uncertain about myself? Why is this making me sad? Why am I become overwhelmed with grief with this does not make sense to me? And so the thing is, a scientist, nowadays it'd be a specific scientist, be a neurophysiologist, which I think is a good thing to go into, or a mathematician or other ones that look for causation. And then the philosopher is like, if they're not of the mindset that uncertainty inherently is within the system, and they're looking only thing for that linear causation, that the emotions, emotional states that lead to an instability within their own system, it would cause them grief. And the effect is to have philosophy in order to cure that grief. But again, I would argue that having emotions and emotional states are a good thing because it may teach us, I think it does, that there is different forms of instability within ourselves, and those things are not so bad. Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, within his work, being in nothingness, he, I believe, was very overwhelmed with the fact of the thought that there was nothingness within himself. But the thing is that led to nihilism and some other things. But I think I would have to step back and think of it not just from his experiences, but from a biological point of view and go, that in itself is not bad. Having that um, whirlpool of nothingness, or vortex as it were, isn't so bad as long as you put it into context. So I think this is very important to bring up, that this was missing from separation and integration, which is on the main website. Um, I hope this does answer some questions that I have left unanswered in the main thesis, the treatment, separation and integration, that if someone's reading it through and go, well, I did not mention emotions, and that is on me, that there was an oversight, and then I don't think I would have to add much more, just that I didn't put emotions, I didn't clarify what emotions would be within the theory. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to any inquiries or any papers that might use these works. And I thank you very much for your time. Take care. Goodbye.